Go back to Anne for getting a dialogue going.
Well, thank you to you both. Before we open it up, I just want to go over, I think, some of the common strains that we've heard in the course of the conversation. I know that those of us who deal with higher education often tend to look at the institutions as having a mantra. It's give me the money and leave me alone. And I think right now you as legislators have a particularly I think, wonderful opportunity in light of the economic challenges that we are all facing. It is certainly not unreasonable on your behalf to ask these institutions who are critical in the development of informed citizens and effective workers to establish that they are doing a good job with taxpayer dollars. And I think both Sarah and Art very eloquently pointed out that the opacity of information about higher education is just incredible. Trying to find out whether you're a parent or a policymaker, what in fact colleges require, what they actually are charging, how long it takes to get out. These are key issues, and they're ones that you all as legislators should be asking. I think going forward, again, and Art mentioned this, having hearings and demanding that institutions provide you just basic data about whether or not they are succeeding with the students they have is essential. And I know there is a model accountability bill that you all have passed in the past that is designed to provide key data on such measures as graduation rates, general education, remediation, the amount of time full professors actually deal with undergraduates, these kinds of baseline pieces of information that will help you assess quality and determine whether or not your universities are preparing students for success after graduation. I hope as legislators you also think about ways of incentivizing, if you will, what institutions are doing. Are they providing a strong general education? If so, think about rewarding them. Are they ensuring intellectual diversity? If so, think about rewarding them. Cost and effectiveness. Again, if there are institutions that are providing a strong curriculum for a lower price, arguably it would be a good incentive to reward them. When the American Council of Trustees and Alumni did whatwilltheylearn.com, our study on general education, what we learned is often paying more doesn't get you more. And we found that 72% of the public universities were requiring at least 3 courses in general education and had a median in-state tuition of a mere $6,000 compared to some of these so-called elites, which were charging immense sums. So you all have an opportunity to reward performance and to single out those entities that are doing a good job. Now, I'm sure you all are going to have questions, obviously the K-12 alignment, ed schools, which that raises. I mean, these are all areas where you can be actively engaged. With that, I know it's not a shy crowd. Why don't we just open it up for questions? And a microphone in the back. If you'll identify yourselves and...
Gene Ward, House of Representatives, Honolulu, Hawaii. We are most known for dumbing down our kids in that we have 17 days of furloughs during, well, the budget cuts were so severe, the unions and the executive took 17 days off of the work, the student schedule. The question is there a standard 180 days in the U.S. that all states have? We're now at 163. And secondly, is there a standard curriculum? Because you said, you know, geometry is the same as in the UK or Hong Kong. The Big Island may have a different set of textbooks and curriculum for another part of the state. So I'm wondering if we are really out of step the way some of us feel that we are.
Let me take a crack at that, and Sarah can chime in. We're pretty unique in the developed world, or even the developing world, in that we have 50 systems. Most countries that we compete with, or very virtually all, have one. There's a Ministry of Education, whether we're talking Singapore or UK or China, etc. And they have a countrywide curriculum. Here we have 50 states and thousands of institutions, and in the higher education, there's each institution. Well, may vary within states, but certainly if you look at the private sector, each institution, every one of them, develops their own standards according to their own mission. It may be a religious institution, it may be a research university. So we have one of the great geniuses of our system is the diversity, and one of the great problems of our system is its diversity. So we don't have it. One of the things that ought to happen with these common standards that are being developed, hopefully, in K through 12, in math and reading, and then ultimately in science, this effort is supposed to be internationally benchmarked. The OECD does do that in the K through 12 arena, and we don't do very well there, particularly in the sciences and in a whole range of other areas. But when it comes to post-secondary education, there's really nothing. It's each school on its own, except within a particular state. And I know Sarah may have some views on that because she's active in the Texas system.
The only thing I would add, The only thing I would add to that is that there may be 50 systems, but there are also several permutations behind each of those systems. I mean, you can have high schools that are within 30 miles of each other, and while we are theoretically no longer doing tracking, the 4 years of math at some high schools are very different than the 4 years of math at other high schools. And, it's hard to not have despair when you hear some principals say, being a global citizen means that they can having enough math to be able to balance a checkbook and having enough comprehension to be able to read a ballot. And then you have another principal within 30 miles saying, I've got to create a lifelong learner, and how do I take whatever was sent to me and make that person intellectually curious? And so even if we just were to stay on the global citizenry side, I do worry that in the absence of college-ready standards, that we're also in each of those systems creating permutations that are just not acceptable in today's economy.
I think your question about utilization of the campus is an important one. Most colleges have very few days, as you point out, 183 days. There have been studies that show increasingly that students get out earlier and earlier, and I think it's a question that you as legislators should be asking. And look chronologically how your institutions, how many days they've been in school, are they reducing the number of days in schools, and why? We all are aware of binge drinking, which is happening across the country. I think one can legitimately argue that when the school week ends on Thursday afternoon, which is often the case. There are many schools where you will not find a course on a Friday, never a course on a Saturday. What do the kids do? They fill their time with drinking. So I think these are very legitimate questions you can ask in terms of the way your institutions schedule their courses and what they expect of their students. We're seeing less than 60% graduating in 6 years, so you have a legitimate question as to what it is they're doing with their time. I think about the question, is there a standard curriculum? You bet there is. The standard curriculum is anything goes. And that's what you should be asking about as well. What is it your institutions expect their graduates to know? Do they expect them to know American history? Do they expect them to have college-level math? And if not, why not? I think it's very interesting to look at the changes over the last 2 or 3 decades. It used to be college students would go to college and they could be ensured exposure to a small number of courses, generally general in scope. And now that has been supplanted with what are known as distribution courses, often hundreds of courses from which students can pick and choose. And you can be sure that as you add the number of courses, it has a major impact on cost and it has a major impact on quality. And these are all things that as legislators you should be asking about.